In this video, in this live, you will discover the 5 signs that you are being used by a guy. Hello, I'm of course your host, Antia Boyd, and I've been helping single successful women for 10 plus years to attract the right man for them. I always want to say 20 because my husband and I combined have like 20 years. Awesome. So, what I want to talk about when it comes to this topic in general is that I so often, when I was dating, I actually was not aware that I was being used by men. I didn't really know what the signs were. So I spent a lot of time questioning myself, second guessing myself, and so on. And, as a matter of fact, I wasted a lot of time giving my power away, feeling disrespected, feeling abandoned, right? And thinking like it was my fault, without knowing that this was never set up to be a win from the get-go. Okay, so if you're here, just pop into the comment section. I'm here. Let me know where you're from, and let's go through the 5 signs, and then we can kind of discuss a little bit through it that I have come across, and then maybe you can add some on as well after that. So the first sign, and you know what, this is really interesting because a lot of women get objectified, and that is actually late night booty calls. So, I know what you want to say. You want to say, well, my man, he works late hours, or, my man, so there's always like a reason. Don't forget, like unavailable men, they usually have good justifications for that, because otherwise, like it wouldn't be able to continue to exist, right? So they need to create a whole reality around how they do life. And, and then also have, of course, reasons. So if the man only calls you at night, like at 10 p.m., 9 p.m. And then the interesting part is that if you don't respond, or you respond, he doesn't respond to you until the next night. So he never responds to you during the day, right? He never calls you during the day. He doesn't make you a priority. And I have to learn this like a long time ago. Like, I mean, oh, hey, Shihua, good to see you. So good to see you. Sorry, we missed each other last night, but I'm sure you had reasons to move that. All right. So anyways, so like, let me know how that feels for you. Did you have guys who were doing late night booty calls with you, and you were giving them all the reasons and excuses and things like that, right? Like, so that's a big no. So keep that in mind. And I know this is a little bit more common. So let's move into the next, which is sign number 4. So I'm going to count backwards. Sign number 5 was late night booty calls. Sign number 4 is he's not available on weekends. So this is usually an indication that this guy has some other chickens in the oven. I just almost wanted to say, right? Some other meatloaves in the oven, so to say, some other irons in the fire. And, so don't settle for, first of all, don't settle for just the weekdays, right? If you're just like this, always like the Wednesday night or the Tuesday night or the Thursday for breakfast, and you feel like kind of you're being squeezed in, right? So does that make sense? Like you kind of feel like, I don't know. I feel like it's so rushed, it's like just kind of, it's convenient for him, and he's not really treating me like a queen. A man who's really interested in you, he has his weekends available for you because you are his priority. Now, most people now, depending on the industry, depending on if he's an entrepreneur and so on, it's going to be available sometime on the weekend. Now, I work all Saturdays. I get that. By the way, also that would be another indication that you're dealing with a workaholic, which is you're also being equally used. So either way, if he's not available on the weekends consistently, like he's not your guy. Like he's not, I would really not recommend moving forward and keeping, because what happens, we women, we keep our head sort of in the sand by what we do is like we future pace, right? We're like kind of rushing to the future, and we're like, oh, he's great, and I'm sure he has reasons for that, and we're not really seeing what's in front of us, but we're anticipating sort of like what we want to see in front of us, right? I call it the Fata Morgana. Like, some people say what happens is when you go through the desert and you're really exhausted and you're really thirsty, which, you know, you can be really thirsty during the dating process, right? And really thirsty for the right man. You finally want to get married and so on. And then what happens is in the desert, right? You start to see things that are not there, right? You start to see the oasis that is actually not there, right? So you're like, you have still 300 miles around you of desert, but you're seeing like, oh, it's this Fata Morgana of like the oasis, right? And like the luscious fruits and the palm trees and the swimming pool, you know? So don't get caught up into that, okay? Okay, number 3 is, and this is pretty common too. You want to pay attention to that, which is words don't match his actions. You know, how many times have you heard, even, I don't care if the guy tells you, I love you, you're the only one, right? Like, you know, I've never felt about anyone so much like you. Or I had like a client and he was like constantly telling her movie lines, right? From Sleepless in Seattle or from all those romantic comedies, right? Like, but so that the words, right? You do always wanted, never expected miracle. By the way, pop into the comment section if there's like any particulars. Hi, Vanessa from Australia. Pop into the comment section. What are some of the words that you have heard that have not found any actions? Is this a live chat? Yes, it's a live chat. As you can tell, yes, I'm interacting live. That's why it's called a live. Yay! Okay, so I don't know if you knew that, ladies, but it's live. So whatever you pop into the comment section, I'm actually can also bring up on the screen. So words don't match actions, right? And actions don't match words. So either way, one way or the other, it doesn't match. And you know what oftentimes happens is when you deal, especially with an emotionally unavailable, a dismissive, avoidant attachment style, what oftentimes occurs, right, is sort of like they have this fantasy. But I'm not necessarily saying that that's like ill meaning, right? But they have this fantasy of what they want things to be. And but they're not like that. And it's actually designed that they're not like that because it keeps them at a distance. You see, if you can't live up to that fantasy that the other person has, that the dismissive, avoidant attachment style, for example, then he has all the reasons to not be close to you. I mean, that just makes sense, right? Because you're not the right one. So, but he sets it up that nobody can ever be the right one for him because he puts it all on a pedestal, right? Another reason why words don't match actions could be a man who doesn't trust himself, which of course means you can also not trust him. He doesn't respect himself. That means he definitely can't respect you, right? Because he will probably cheat, betray, lie, abandon, and ultimately ghost. You know, those are also the ghosters of the world as well, are men who really don't trust themselves. Because when they trust themselves, right, words, actions, and thoughts are actually in alignment. So if they feel like, oh, there's something that's not quite working out, or so on and so forth, they are actually saying something ahead of time, right? You know, I had this one guy, and I was almost kind of getting intimate with him. That was way back in the day, before I met Brody. And he said, you know, before we do that, I just have to tell you, I'm still intimate with my ex-girlfriend. By the way, it was still ex-girlfriend, right? But so he was honest with me. He was authentic with me because he trusted himself, right? And I trusted myself. So I attracted a man into my life who I could trust. So his words matched his actions, which I really appreciated that. Okay, so let's see what's happening. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So let's go into the next one. And of course, would love to hear if you have any other feedback on the third point. Number 2, this is more subtle. He doesn't ask you any questions. It's all about him. Now, it's one thing if you go on a date and he talks about himself. This could also be because he's nervous and he wants to leave a good impression. However, if you feel that this is a consistency, this is sort of a theme, that it's like, wait a minute, it's always about him. This is like, he's not really interested in me. And to give you an example, this has to be actually from myself, where actually the man was on the receiving end of that, is when I was dating. And again, and I bring you the opposite example too. But I wasn't really interested in this guy. I was trying to talk myself into it, but I wasn't really interested in him. And at some point he told me, and by the way, this guy brought me flowers, my favorite flowers. He even arranged like a dinner with my favorite coach, like a VIP dinner, you know, all of that. So he really wanted to make me happy. By the way, ladies, this is really how you deserve to be treated, like a queen, right? This is what this looks like, you know? But unfortunately, I just couldn't get there. I just wasn't attracted to him. And I think part of it was because I felt he was sort of a people pleaser. He didn't really believe that he was worthy, even if he doesn't bring me the flowers, even if he doesn't arrange the VIP dinner with my favorite coach and so on, right? Like someone I was really looking up to. And so I wasn't really, for whatever reason, I wasn't really attracted to him. And it was funny because he had done actually some work, what it means to be a man, and he had broken through some barriers of masculinity and things like that. But you know what was happening was he's still disassociated. I felt like he was going through the motions and he was doing things that he was told to do, right? But I feel like he didn't really understand in his heart why he was actually doing them. Does that make sense? So anyways, so yes, he said to me one day, hey, feel free to ask me questions. And that was like after 3 dates or so. And I just realized, right, like, wow, I'm not really interested. You know what I mean? And he probably felt used. And it wasn't like it being used. I was really trying to, you know, because he was so great and he was treating me like a queen, I was really like, let's see what's there, right? You always want to be open to that and not jump to conclusions. However, on the other side of the spectrum, if you have guys where even after the first date, after the first impression sort of, right? Like they're nervous, they don't really know you. But if you realize it's like always about him, he talks about how his day was, right? And you ask, and every time when you ask him a question, he's happy to answer. And every time, but every time when there's like an opportunity for him to ask you questions or to focus on you, it's like bland. It's like almost literally that's how it feels. And what happens is we start to feel actually uncomfortable. We're like, it almost feels more comfortable to ask them questions, right? Versus like actually open up an opportunity for them to ask us questions. That's a big red flag that you're being used. He needs to have you for his own approval or for his own sense of self and self-worth and all of that. But he's not really invested in you, right? He's like, let me tell you this, and I've done videos that you can check out on my channel here directly, you know, 5 signs, green flags, all of that a man is into you, right? And one is actually he wants to make you happy, right? So a man will ask you questions because he wants to know a lot about you. He wants to know how to make you happy, right? He's really like lining up everything, how you're really fitting together. He's visualizing his life with you. So he's asking you questions because it's almost like his joy is being magnified by you being, you know, by him knowing more about you, if that makes sense, right? And he will also want you to find out more about him as well. So that he wants to have this connection. When he asks you questions, he creates a connection. He connects an intimacy. And so that's what he's going to experience when he's asking questions, when he's interested in you. Okay, let's see here. Okay, Maeda, hi. Vanessa said inconsistency. Yep, totally. Okay, yeah, let me know, ladies, if you had ever guys who didn't ask you any questions, and not just like the first date where they were talking potentially about themselves because they're nervous, or you know what? I had someone I'd sat on a date with that I worked with a couple years ago, and she said he didn't ask me any questions. I was like, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, let me just talk to him. And I didn't tell him what she said. I literally just had a little bit of an interview, so to say. With him, not an interview, it's like just more like a debrief call, so to say, after I set him up on a date. And he was like, yeah, it was so hard. Like I had to make the whole conversation. It was almost like she was like cutting off the flow. Like she would just not really be receptive and available. So it's really tough for me to carry the whole conversation. So also be aware of what kind of signals are you sending? Wasn't that interesting? It was so valuable for her when she heard that reflected back to her, right? Like, wow, you know, that's definitely not something she probably expected, you know? And it was such a huge breakthrough for her to be like, wow, what things am I sending where I'm actually not being invited to be asked questions, right? Okay. Vanessa, you just said, let's say, yes, this is so true when he asks a question, but walks away when you answer. Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that, Vanessa. Like, what in the world, right? Like, so tell me what kind of question that was. So you can kind of like go a little deeper into that. He asked a question, but then walks away when you answer. That usually is an indication that he's just going through the motions, right? He's like, or he feels like sort of the tension. He's like, oh, I should ask her a question, but he's not really invested. He's not really connected. He's not really owning the question. He doesn't really want to connect this, create this connection, this intimacy. And this could be many different levels why, not just that he wouldn't be interested in you, it could be also that he's afraid of intimacy, that he's not available. And there's many different reasons for that. But to really think, wow, well, thanks for that. You know what I mean? But he just walks away when you answer. Which, by the way, just really quick, funny story, a little bit off topic, but that's how I felt as a German coming to the US, because in Germany, I don't know if you guys know that. I don't know who lives in Germany or who lived or traveled in Germany or Europe. But when you ask in Germany, how are you? It's actually like very intimate, right? It's actually like, wow, I really know you. We really have like, you don't just go over to a random person to ask them like, how are you? It's almost like too intrusive, right? So when somebody's like, wow, how are you? Like they would literally say, do I know you? Right? So that's what I would be in Germany. So then here I came to the US, it was 16 years ago. And so I would go into a store and they would say, how are you? And then they would walk away. Right. And I know that's totally off topic, but I felt like so deregulated about that. So I know what it feels like, right? When there's a question, even though now I know it's a custom, obviously, but there's a question, although I'm never like that anyways. Like I still say, how are you? And I'm still open to receive like an honest reflection and open up a dialogue around it versus, and sometimes I avoid the question, how are you? Because it sends up the sequence. It's almost like when you say, how are you? Then the other person says, oh, I'm good. How are you? Right? Because it's sort of like just this cultural sequence. So you want to avoid cultural sequences, like any phrases that open up cultural sequences, if that makes sense, right? Okay, Rhubarb just said, great topic. Jessica, you just said, never asked me questions, only talked about himself. If I started talking about my day, he somehow turned it into something about him. Yes, oh, that's another good point, Jessica. Yes, exactly. By the way, are you somewhere in Europe? Swenson is like a, it sounds like Netherlands or something like that, Danish or something. Oh my gosh, totally. I should put that on my screen too. He turns us into something about him, right? I have a good example. We were at a meetup on Sunday, and my husband, he's like multi-talented, right? I am so proud of my husband. He's awesome, but he doesn't always show it. So I said, babe, you wrote this children's book. He illustrated it, and we published it 3 years ago, right? It's so great. It's called Tony the Darling Tonya. It's on Amazon. You can look it up. But anyway, so I was like so excited to give this to one of our friends. And we were like, oh my gosh, because we saw the reaction of one of our friends, and he's like, totally, dude, you rock. You're like amazing. Are you kidding me? This is freaking insane, right? And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait, because this guy that we were giving the book to, it was for his kids, by the way. He's very creative. He's super talented. He's a marketing genius. So we're like, wow, I can see the reflection. Because, sometimes we share something with people because we want to see them magnify our experience, right? We're already so excited and we're sharing it. But oftentimes we also share it because we're hoping to get it magnified even more. That's part of like that shared experience, right? It's kind of the same thing when Brody and I were traveling the world. And we're like, wow, we're like in the most beautiful places in the freaking world, you guys, right? We're like on the beaches of Thailand, in the Great Barrier Reef, right? Like, I mean, in front of the temples in Japan. And so you're thinking like, wow, you're almost like on overload. You're almost like, I can't even take it anymore. It's like, I know this sounds like really bratty, right? But it's literally like, this is incredible, right? Like, it's insane, right? Like, it's so stunning. And then what's the next wish that we have? The next wish we have is like, I wish I could share this with my loved ones, right? Because the only way how this gets better is by actually sharing it. So we magnify the experience. Okay. So then anyways, what ended up happening is this guy, literally within 2 seconds, he just like scrolled through the pages. And this is a really cool book. I mean, but he illustrated and he wrote it, right? And he's like, oh, that reminds me of a story, when there was something with the, some experience I had with like a meat eater, with somebody who's not a meat eater, and how they reacted. And right away, I'm like, huh? Like, this is like an incredible book. And like, that's all you have to say, right? It's like, yeah, that's a really good point, Jessica. They somehow turn it into something about them. And oftentimes you can even tell because they're like, huh, really? Like that didn't really even have anything to do with it. It's like disassociating, right? That disassociating. And you can tell it. You can feel like cut off. You're so excited. You're emotionally connecting, and then they turn it into something about them. And then it's like the emotions are being cut off. It feels so uncomfortable. Yeah, Vanessa just said, like, yes, that's right. It feels like he's asking a question, but he doesn't care. And Rhubarb said, like, they might ask, but make it obvious they're not really all that interested in your response. Yeah, and Rhubarb, that's also, this is again, just like going through the motions, right? When you guys watch, there's a really great documentary, you guys. I would really, I recommend watching it. It's called Dating Around. I don't know if it's available in all the countries. I think it's on Netflix. And it's really interesting because I want you to watch the dating patterns. By the way, I will debrief all of that too. I have like a whole debrief series of that in my home study course, which, by the way, if you want to chat more about that, you can watch my free master class that I'm going to be posting in the comment section here as well. So we're going more into all of that, right? Like disassociation, past conflicts, all of that. But it's exactly right. But what you see in one of those dialogues on the date, it's so interesting. They just go through the motions, right? Like, not all of the dates. So you see all the different distinctions. And they actually talk, like, oh, you're from New York. Okay, great. Oh, I'm from Chicago. And oh, great. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I do this. And And it's like you just kind of go through the motions. Like, it doesn't really feel like, are you really connecting? Is somebody, like if I knock, right, is someone home? Because I don't even feel like you're here. You're just like going through the motions. And then that's actually what oftentimes happens, that we end up at the end of the date. Or like a man is not asking us out on a second date because it's just went on the motions, like, instead of saying, hey, we could really answer this question right now, or we could just like, what I really want to know is, if you came with a warning sign, what would that be? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, just become more creative, become almost like asking question fool, so to say, or genius, whatever you want to call it, right? Or freak. Because like, if you come with questions like, and I learned that when I did speed dating, because I was like, okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is ask them the same question that like 10 other women asked them already, right? Like, where are you from? It's like interview questions. Nobody's interested in that. Like, it becomes mechanic versus organic. It doesn't feel juicy. It doesn't feel vibrant. It doesn't feel alive at all. It actually has someone totally check out, right? Versus saying, what if you surprised them? What if you created a state change? And you would actually say, hey, so, I don't know, what famous actor, would be the most annoying roommate? Or, if you were an animal, what would you be and why? Like, make them think, open up something that's unexpected. And they're like, wow, we're having a different conversation here, because you know what, all the other things we can just cover along the way, right? We can cover where you originally come from, or what country you would like to be in or travel in, or We can cover all of that along the way. But that tells you so much more about the person, and you create such more of a deep connection, because it's not a rehearsed answer like all the other things, right? It's going to be rehearsed answers. And then Jessica said Sweden. Okay, I'm in UK, and what Jessica said is very common here. Yeah, okay. And then let's see here. And Rhubarb said, and then there's the dead air when you're talking. Not interested. This is what I wanted to terminate. This is when I want to terminate the conversation. I have a girlfriend. She's not really a girlfriend. She's more like an acquaintance, I would call it, right? And she's like larger than life, really successful, all of that, right? And it's so interesting. When it's about her, she talks until the cows come home, right? Like, she talks. I mean, you even see me like my eyes rolling, because it kind of reminds me of my mom a little bit. And then when I actually start to share about me, you notice there's no investment, vice versa, right? They're not like, oh, really? Tell me more. Or you don't feel like there's even energy coming towards you, right? It's just like almost bland. And here's the reason why, with those particular patterns, by the way, there's different patterns, right? But with this particular pattern, the reason why is that they feel like nothing. So that's a coping mechanism for them, but it means, you're being used, right? Because you're being used for them. It's not that they really want to connect with you, that they even have the ability to connect with you, at least not in the short term. Okay, next. This is really good, Rhubarb. I love all your reflections here. Yes, so helpful. And Cynthia said, hi, every time I ask my boyfriend a question or tell him something, I do like that he does or says he does anything to not admit or talk about it. How to get him to be more attentive? It's like he runs away. Okay, let me see again. You ask him a question and, oh, don't. Okay, every time I ask my boyfriend a question, tell him something I don't like that he does or says. He does anything to admit or talk about it. Oh, well, okay, so those are coping mechanisms, right? That he activates, like he stone walls. So there's actually a couple of things. So there's two types of men, really. So one kind of man, I just experienced this with my client. They become so she called him out on something, right? And turns out he was actually cheating and all of that. But it was really great because he met us with attack, which was the ultimate confirmation for us. So there's either like the kind of man that goes into attack and really leans in and just really becomes almost reactive, right? Well, who do you think you are, Cynthia? Do you think you have all the answers, right? So they become like really sort of almost demeaning. And then it's the other type of man, and they retreat. This is also going more towards a dismissive attachment style. Oh, Farzana, thank you. Farzana just said fantastic video. I know you guys don't know what I'm talking about. So this is interesting, right? Because like you're dealing with someone who's erring more on the avoidance side versus the leaning inside, right? He's erring more on the leaning outside. And so, of course, it depends on what kind of question you ask, how you ask the question, how you set up the question. I teach all of that in my programs as well. Or if you haven't gotten my book, it teaches about the 6 masculine archetypes. Magnetize Your Man. It's on Amazon. So it's depending a lot, like what kind of archetype do you communicate into when you talk to a man? What archetype are you talking from when you talk to him? Because I can ask a question and I can get a totally different reaction depending on what energy I ask the question with, right? Remember, only 8% is what we say is communication. The rest is nonverbal, right? Those are body language, facial expressions, other cues, right? Context. And by the way, context is always dangerous because context comes from assumption, and assumption comes from unconscious expectations. And of course, the unconscious expectations, they come from what you learned as a child, what that means. You know, like, was it safe to be emotionally available? You know, what did that mean? Anyway, so yeah, I would look a lot more. And then in terms of how to get him to be more attentive is to focus more on yourself. So the more you try to like rail him in, right? Like, come on, you know what I mean? And it's more about like you like allow yourself to become that bright light. I call it becoming from him focused to me focused, which by the way is part of my training, the free masterclass. Again, I put that into the comment section too. But it's about like becoming me focused instead of him focused, because if you become him focused, then he's almost has no reason to be attentive to you, because you're sending him that unconscious signal that you're focusing all on him. You're more attentive towards him versus actually the other way around, that he should be more attentive towards you, versus when you're actually minding your own business, then he's actually like, oh, what's Cynthia doing? What's going on? You know, like I want to know, oh, I haven't heard from her. Like what's happening? You know, create a little bit like that gap for him that he comes towards you. Okay, Rhubarb said like lack of engagement, totally. Okay, Maeda said, oh, Farsa, I just like said, okay. Maeda, what should we ask from our man that he can open up? I'm really disappointed to find a subject which can connect us deeply. I think it's not even so much about what you say, but it's much more about how vulnerable you are. So I was just on a call with a really amazing woman, very well aware, has done lots of relationship, dating work, all of that, right? But what we found out, it was really about the energy. Like she didn't even realize when she was disassociating, or she didn't even realize when she was talking about something that she actually doesn't want. You know, she was actually leaving what she didn't want and not focusing on she was leaving what she wanted and focusing on what she didn't want, right? Or she actually became more general when she was actually talking about herself. So it's a lot about that. It's really more about, what should we ask from our man that he can open up? You know, so it's much more about like how you approach it, what context you create. You know, one thing that I always like to do, I love one of my favorite contexts, by the way, I always say context over content. So context is so much more important than content. You can say the wrong things. You can have the wrong content in quotation marks within the right context, right? And you're still going to get the right results. But if you have the wrong context or no context, and then you could even say the right thing, you're not going to get the right outcome, if that makes sense, right? So one thing how I always like to set context is by actually saying something like, hey, you know what? Like, one of my desires is to create a deep connected, to create a trusting and authentic relationship, right? And in light of that, first of all, you can even ask them. So what you always want to do, you want to bounce back and forth. We want to have a little bit of a buy-in, you know what I mean? Like, to be like, okay, is he still on board? Does he, because when you just talk at him, then you're not going to get necessarily the response. But if you get small buy-ins, right, you're like, hey, this is my goal. Is this your goal too? Or what is your goal? Right? And then he's like, oh yeah, I would love to do that too, or whatever. Okay, cool. So in light of that, and again, don't write this down. This is just an example, right, of setting a context. Like, I mean, don't write this down, but like, that's exactly what you have to say. That was true for me because I went through a whole training on becoming aware what the qualities I want in a relationship. And mine was like authentic and trusting. And then in light of that, what I want to do is I want to be always honest, right? So that's because that's how I really create. That's how I have that trust. That's how I can trust myself. And so, and then like, how about you, right? So again, so does that make sense? You go back and forth. And then by the time you actually share, you've created so much rapport and so much trust. You have so much buy-in, which, by the way, most people don't have buy-in. Think about a solicitor that comes to your door. Yesterday, we had a guy, I kid you not, he rang the bell 3 times and he followed up with 6 knocks for every ring, right? And he came twice. He came at noon and he came at 8. I will never open the door because it's unsolicited, by the way. We have a huge sign, no solicitation. And it feels a little bit like that in dating if you don't get like a buy-in from the man, right? What happens is when we feel solicited, we block, right? We're like, get out of here. I almost took my megaphone. We actually have a megaphone just in case. I'm just like, leave my property, right? Like literally, right? Get out of my face. And I think that's the same in dating. It's like, wow, I wasn't ready for this yet, right? Oh, he may be not ready for that, but he doesn't even know because you didn't do a step-by-step buy-in. And so now he feels invaded. He doesn't know that he feels invaded, but he has a compensation mechanism, if that makes sense. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Fasana said, fantastic. He will also point a prompt he had with me whenever I bring something up. That is when it doesn't choose. He had with me whenever I bring something up. Yeah, of course, like he becomes like defensive, of course, that makes perfect sense. But that's also good, Cynthia, because and then also actually that actually shows me that he has a little bit that attack shame shield, right? So again, very powerful what I just told Maeda. Was it like Maeda? Let me just see. Yeah, Maeda. If you use that, you're going to be much more successful because he's not going to go into his shame shield so fast. Okay, Cynthia just said, oh, wow, thanks, like your show. Awesome, awesome. Liani. This is all very interesting. Glad I run into your channel here. Yeah, Cynthia, unsubscribe. This is like we're jamming here every week. We have lives, and then also based on the lives, I create more extensive YouTube trainings, right? And all of that. And but I want to get also to my last point because I have numero uno, which goes a little bit along what we just talked about, which is he acts different in the spotlight than at home. Now, that's a little bit different than he doesn't follow up on his actions. It's just interesting. This reminds me of my mom. So when she was in the spotlight, and by the way, this is also, what happens is in your nervous system when you experience something like that at your home, your nervous system internalizes that, right? Like there's something I can't trust. When somebody expresses something, there's some betrayal around that, right? Like what I see is not what I get kind of thing. It's not what I see is what I get. That's how you create trust. And so those kind of particular men, right? They're larger than life outside, right? Like they're always in a good mood, which by the way, one of my clients, that was the case, right? Like he was like super popular, lots of friends, always traveling, busy, working, and all of that. But what was happening is, and I had a feeling, but it's always hard, of course, when I don't directly talk to them, of course, right? It was always easier when the men directly came to us and I could actually talk to them and get direct feedback. But what was interesting was with this guy, right? I had a feeling intuitively that he was using that to cover something up, right? Like that this was some kind of cope. It was just a little too much. It was a little too loud. So it's not like Hey, of course, you can be social, you can be extroverted. Oh, totally. Oh, I'm all for it, right? But it was like, it didn't match how he then behaved in the dating dynamic. It was kind of strange. It was kind of like he was almost like avoidant than in the dating dynamic. He was like busy and he didn't respond right away. And he didn't really go deep in conversations. See, then that doesn't match, right? Because if you think about somebody who's more social, outgoing, let's go, right? You think probably also someone who's more on the anxious scale, which is usually, and you don't think about anxious as necessarily like a judgment, but just as like they're more leaning in versus leaning out, right? So they would rather actually have a conversation with a person. They feel they get energy from a conversation. They actually feel safe when they have eye contact with a person, as opposed to the avoidant attachment style feels very unsafe when they have eye contact with another person, right? And this is just the attachment style, right? They can learn that they can soothe themselves into it and all of that, but it takes work and it takes awareness and it takes commitment. So he acts different in Spotlight. And then, of course, we also, I know what you probably want to think about, and I've done some videos about this, which is, of course, the classical, hi, Devin, I love your like little emojis. I just want to show Devin's emojis. So great, right? Like the detectives, the ears, the nose, them up, right? Like, yeah, listen to what's coming up, right? And so, again, what I want to see here is that the narcissists are like that too, right? They're one thing, oh, I didn't finish what was my mom was. But then at home, my mom would be like depressed, or she would be like swinging. She would like yell at me, which, by the way, she didn't yell in public. Like, you know what I mean? Everything was great on the outside, right? That she would yell at me, and then the next second she would go into the living room. And you guys, I didn't really get this until a few years ago because it was so normal for me. We are normalizing everything that's been happening to us. Like, okay, that's how it was. You know what I mean? Isn't that like how it is? It's like, no, this is actually like totally not how it is. And so she would go into the living room, turn on Doris Day, which is like, from the 70s, or some of you may know that, right? And had like a little piccolo, little piccolo bottle. It has, those piccolo bottles that maybe one glass fits or so. And that said, how can you yell at your daughter? You know that there's massive distress, and then go switch completely off, right? So that would be an example of acting different in the spotlight than at home, right? On the outside, oh, she's so great. She's so awesome. I don't know what you're talking about. Your mom is so awesome. Like, even it's so funny because my brother-in-law, like, he actually lived in Germany for a few years. So imagine that, like, he of course connected with my mom, blah, 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 when she was here for a visit and all of that. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, you will never see her the way I saw her. So that's like the last one. He acts different in spotlight than he acts at home. And I love that, Devin, right? Like, yeah, keep an eye on that. And don't give that like excuses, right? It's like, no, you're being used. Like, what's happening here is like he wants to have this attention and this approval on the outside. Or maybe he even says in the spotlight, oh yeah, oh, Devin, she's so awesome. Oh, she's so gorgeous. I love her. She's so amazing. All of that, right? And then behind the scenes, he like puts you down, he diminishes you, he criticizes you, he disrespects you, right? So it's like complete opposite. All right, ladies. So this was the live for today. I had so much fun. So of course, if you want to follow me, I'm going to pop my masterclass in the comment section as well to learn more about those topics. But yeah, keep coming, because the life is what you make it. I have my talking points, but then it becomes really rich by you actually bringing the reflections as well. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, go ahead and do that. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video, so more women can be notified of that juicy content. And also, if you haven't joined my free Facebook group, hello, I have a live in there every week as well. And we have hundreds of women ask questions every day. It's nuts town, 67 answers to every question. It's so crazy. So if you haven't joined my Facebook group, go ahead and do that as well. Well, ladies, I had such a blast. Let's do it again. Much love to you, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.